Hi, everybody. It's meteorologist Joe Cioffi here on this Wednesday morning. I was planning to wake up early, but my alarm didn't go off, and that plus the fact that I was really tired, so I wound up sleeping a bit. So the live stream this morning with regards to Hurricane Maria comes after landfall has occurred, and we do have Maria now on Puerto Rico. And we'll show you on the satellite loop. We do not have a radar view of Maria because the radar is out now at San Juan. So say morning to Hosea, Tom Gorsuch, Scott, Corey, Badziak. I got it right. But you can see on the loop, the Maria went through an eyewall replacement cycle as it moved away from St. Croix. So between that and you start to get to the interaction with the landmass of Puerto Rico, and you saw just a little bit of weakening, but it still went in every bit as a Category 4, borderline Category 5 hurricane here. And now the eye, of course, is filled in. The eye is filled in as you would expect as it starts to, it's interacting with that landmass, which has mountains on it. So Puerto Rico getting just absolutely pounded with this at this point. I actually did happen to see on one of the news channels the reporter standing out there in a sustained 100-mile-an-hour wind. You know what? Is that really necessary? You just show the visual if you can from a safe place is one thing, but you have to have somebody standing out there where you've got trees basically snapping and flying around you, and as he described it, just destruction of all sorts of building structures. I'm not doing that. All right, so let me just say an extra good morning, some more good mornings to Cynthia Guinyautis, Medavici, Chris Garrity, Gary L., Judy Strandberg, Stephen Franco, Billy Johnson, and PRJ Grudge, and Hosea. Good morning to you. You're watching. This is the fourth. I'm sorry. This is it is the fourth Category 4 or higher hurricane we've had this season. This is also the third Category 4 hurricane to make landfall, and Puerto Rico is a U.S. territory, so it's actually the third Category 4 hurricane to affect the United States this season. And that is a rather impressive stat. I believe it might be the first time that we've had 3 Category 4s make landfall in the U.S. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I'm sure Anthony or our statistician will let me know about this. Anyway, we are going to look at the longer range with all this because it is very complicated going forward with what Maria may do. And let's first off, let's start off. And we really can't even do this until we look at Jose, because that is front and center, the key to the pattern going longer term. So we'll bring Jose, which, by the way, with all the attempts that I have made to want to have Jose go away as a tropical system, it's really hanging on quite impressively, relatively speaking. Now, of course, I made the loop disappear, so let me see if I can do this again. There we go. Second time was the charm. So let me move it up to the front of the line. And Jose is now right at about 39 and 70 west. I'm actually still getting some breezy conditions. I'm in the central part of Long Island, and it's it's pretty breezy out there. We've even had some rain that's come in from the east that is swept back westward, but it hasn't really amounted to too much. But we're going to start to see Jose stall. It may do so at any time today. Oh, hi, Kim Monaco. How are you? Good to see you here. I'm not completely out. I'm going to go after all your questions in just a bit. So let me just James NASCAR fan, Janet Velez Colon, Cullen, Howard, Maga Margie, All good morning to all of you, and also to you, Kim. So in the meantime, here's Jose, just getting ready. Very soon, it's just going to come to a grinding halt. And it really, actually, as I said, is holding its own quite well. Thank you, Cynthia Guignautis, for hitting the super chat this morning. Really appreciate it. And still no sign of a break with the way these storms are, with what we're going to be dealing with going forward. So I think I'm going to be fairly busy with all of this. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Hang on, let me just type a big thank you. There we go. So let's start off with the models with Jose, because one of the things about this hurricane season is I'm seeing things that I really haven't seen before, and that's mainly because you need a long period of history to really start to see things that are similar. So notice that virtually every hurricane track model, after a very short distance further to the east, loop Jose around and move it back toward the west, toward Delaware Bay. This is a consensus among not just the hurricane tracking models, but when we look at the GFS. Now, I don't know how much of a system we're going to have looping back, because it is probably going to weaken, but you know what? It has held together a lot better than I would have expected at this point. But here we have it on the GFS, the ensembles, and look how tightly clustered they are, except for one or two of them that leave it out there. They all bring this back, although, again, the trend is for a weakening as it comes westward. Now, this is going to have implications regarding coastal flooding over the next couple of days. There is going to continue to be coastal flooding issues for New Jersey and Long Island, and down probably even into Delaware and on up into southeastern New England. New moon tonight, autumnal equinox tomorrow. So the astronomical tides are going to be very high over the next several days, and I think the peak tide might be on Friday, because it usually happens a couple of days after the new moon. So coastal flooding is going to be a big concern, and it's going to continue into the rest of the week and maybe even into the weekend, because then we're going to have Maria churning up the ocean. Now the ocean has not gotten a break since Irma was around. So let's now look at the Hurricane Center's forecast in comparison to what the models are showing with Jose. And again, we are looking at this because Jose is going to be one of the important keys, and they acknowledge the loop occurring, although they keep the loop very, very tight and don't bring the low back further to the west. That may not happen until the first part of next week anyhow, but this forecast goes out just to 2 a.m. Sunday, so if you probably wanted to take it out further, you would push it back off to the west. They maintain it as a tropical storm or remnant tropical storm to a tropical depression all the way through. But don't be surprised if this thing fires up to some degree. I wouldn't at all be surprised at that if that winds up happening. So here we go. From now, we're going to take a look at Maria's forecast track from the Hurricane Center. And then we're going to look at the rest of the models, and then we're going to talk about what the GFS and the European did last night. So we'll move this up to the top. So here's the Hurricane Center, pretty much following along, keeping Maria as a major hurricane right up until 2 a.m. Sunday. Probably coming very close to Turks and Caicos and some of the southeastern Bahamas, where we have hurricane warnings in effect. And then they weaken it slightly when it gets up to 30 degrees north. But who knows what we're going to have at that point. I want to see what happens when it emerges from Puerto Rico, how much it's weakened. We could see pressures maybe up above 940. Wouldn't be a big surprise. And I also want to see what happens once the center gets back out over the open waters of the Atlantic, how much re-strengthening occurs and how strong does it get. Because it does have some time and favorable conditions for at least the next couple of days So it may not get back to 906 millibars, but it certainly could get down into the 920s. So we'll see what happens when that occurs. Again, just waiting for it to move offshore. Okay, so the hurricane track models for Maria, all up the east coast offshore as far as they go, and you can they all pass just north of the north shore of the Dominican Republic, so there will be some tropical storm issues here. But in terms of hurricane conditions, the core should remain offshore of the DR, and then passing over Turks and Caicos and near the southeastern Bahamas, and then a turn northward up the east coast. Notice you don't have a lot of variation in terms of the models are the furthest to the west, and the models are further to the east. They're all pretty tightly clustered going into the long range. So that's unusual to see that. It would lead you to have some high confidence that this is going to happen this way. And we'll look at the GFS on the ensembles. And let's move that up. Whoops. Move it. There you go. And most of the all the ensembles are fairly close to the coast. The average path is just offshore to just southeast of Long Island, and then they turn it to the northeast. But you've got outliers that bring it northwestward. All of that is going to hinge on Jose and what happens with that and where it goes in terms of its track. So let's at this point now we can go bring up the we'll bring up the GFS and the European from last night. And let's see, where am I? Okay. It's hard to get going in the morning sometimes. Okay. So here we have, we'll start with the GFS. Do I have to make sure I got the latest model run, which is always wants to default to another one. And here we have from the overnight mid-cycle run of the model. And when we get to, this is for 2 a.m. on Thursday, and its position with Jose, you notice it just comes to a grinding halt and then brings it back to the southwest with actually rain backing westward into the coastal areas Thursday night into Friday to some degree. And it hovers there south of Long Island right into the weekend. And here comes Maria now. And notice that Jose at this point is weakening enough that it looks like it's gradually being absorbed by Maria, which is such a dominant circulation as it moves up the coast, very large as indicated by the GFS. And the track last night takes it northeast and then northward. And just at this point here, it starts to turn it to the northeast. Okay, so it makes for a closer call. Certainly, it makes for a close call. And what becomes a question is how far west does it get once it moves off the Puerto Rico and starts to make its way toward the southeastern Bahamas. What's happening in the upper air is pretty much, as we've been describing the last couple of days. There really isn't too much change with this in terms of the upper air structure, but we have a lot of things going on with just the fact that you have the upper air by itself, but that you have another interacting tropical storm that's going to impact the track makes it, again, a very, very difficult puzzle. But you can see here, but this is the upper air for Saturday. You have big upper high back from the Great Lakes down into the middle Mississippi Valley, okay? And you got that closed circle, the closed line, the wind is clockwise around the high, so the flow along the East Coast from Maine down to Virginia is from the northeast, so you have this remnant low of Jose, and you have now a weakness in the Atlantic ridge, high pressure in the northeastern Gulf aloft, high pressure out near Bermuda aloft, and Maria, like Jose, just kind of punches its way right through it. And now we have what's left of Jose disappearing, and Maria riding up the east coast into an upper high to the north. So usually we have deep troughs for these things to react to, but this is a second system now. Jose did the same thing. Now this one's doing the same thing, where we're bringing it up into an upper ridge that's trying to build over the top. It appears now that the model's overzealousness with troughing in the jet stream that coming out from the west, the models were too aggressive and too fast, but it does act, it is a bit of a player, because once it moves into the northern plains a week from today, it's going to be enough to just kind of give it that nudge to the northeast, because that trough is now swinging to the east and intensifying. So it looks like it's going to be a race. How far north does Maria get before this trough that's going to be far to the west is going to start to influence the upper atmosphere in the east, where it gives Maria that nudge to push out to the northeast. And by the way, on this particular run, for my friends on my channel that are watching from Nova Scotia and from Newfoundland, this particular run brought Maria right over you. So I think that's worth a look on the southeastern Canada view. And this is one that I always have trouble finding on here. So let me see if that's it. Yep, I did good. Okay, so let me just back it up for you. And this is the outcome for your area. If, again, we're in a long range here, folks, so don't write this all down in stone yet by any means. We're talking latter part of next week, so there's a long way to go to get there. But based on the GFS's track with the upper air, if that kicker times out the way it does, it might make for a threat for you in the longer term. It passes right over, just right along the south coast of Nova Scotia and over southeastern Newfoundland. This usually would be the time where you guys might get to see some of these things. So you keep this in the back of your mind now. If you've got it, something like this out in the Atlantic, you have to pay attention to this for the next week or so. And of course, the East Coast is going to be paying close attention as well. We'll look at the Europeans' view, please. All of a sudden, it's decided not to want me. Let me look at the Europeans' view. I can't seem to. There we go. Slow on the uptake. Ah, excellent. Make sure that's the latest model run. And it is. And we'll go backwards. All right, so you have Jose off the North Carolina coast. You have Maria now emerging, and the European has a pretty tight pass over the southeastern Bahamas. You can see Jose sitting and milling around just southeast of 40 and 70, and then it gets basically absorbed by Maria as Maria moves up the coast to just off the North Carolina-Virginia coastline, and then gets that kick out to the northeast because of that upstream trough that we have. And the model is not really that different from the GFS. So at least we know the players involved in this, and hopefully there's not anything at the last minute. But you can watch on the wider view here how this all reacts with the upper trough that's swinging out from in the Rockies. At this point, it's all ridge, and what's left of Jose. But now you start to see that shortwave trough approach the northern plain. So it gets a nudge, not just right after this point, which would be next Wednesday. and that upper trough in the west, just with that kind of a structure and that kind of a shape where it's progressive. The tilt is northeast-southwest, so what we call positive tilt. It's going to act as a kicker if that is the case. Now, if it winds up being deeper and faster, that's a different story. Now, you'll notice that as we go into Friday and the weekend, we start to see a lot of depth. There's an upper low that develops in the southern Great Lakes with this. The actual what represents Maria is here southeast of Long Island next Thursday evening, and then it's that you can still see a representation of that in the jet stream sitting over southeastern Newfoundland. So this is what the European is showing as a deep trough. It wants to bring down a deep trough into the eastern part of the United States, and that remains to be seen because the models have been doing that from time to time, and it never seems to wind up looking like that. But at some point, it's where we are going to get rid of this ridge in the east, and I think that that's going to happen once Maria plays itself out. It probably does open up a door for a change in the weather pattern out of the getting rid of that ridge in the east, at least for a while, and going to something resembling the early part of the fall season. So there you have it, pretty much in a nutshell. So I'm going to just kind of scroll back and let's look at your questions. I'll bring up the satellite of Maria in the meantime so that you can watch that loop away. And we'll move that up to the top. So I don't know if anybody is on here from coastal New Jersey, if they could, be curious to know what kind of flooding. Judy Strandberg asks if there's anything coming after Maria. Well, we do have actually the remnant low of Lee looking a little better organized this morning, and that might regenerate back into a tropical storm, but it's moving northward and will be not a problem. I don't think it'll come westward. And then I think we need a break in the tropics for a little while after Maria is done, please. And yeah, your 2 earthquakes, David Fuller, and 4 and Category 4 hurricane, Category 5 from yesterday with Maria's status when it got down to 906 millibars, stronger than Irma in terms of pressure, and it broke through into the top 10 all time. Yeah, there's a lot of weird things going on from that standpoint. Let's see. I'm becoming skeptical of the relationship between Jose and Maria. If Jose remains stagnant, I could see Maria actually staying on a northwest track. Yeah, you know what? Well, you can't be skeptical. Let me just correct. I'm just going to, if gently, you're skeptical of the relationship between Jose and Maria, but if Jose remains stagnant, then Maria could track further to the northwest. Yeah, I think that's possible. So there actually is a relationship. So just so you realize that by being stagnant, by just sitting there stalled and maybe just decaying, it is having an impact. If it pulls into the west, into Chesapeake Bay, it's going to have it could have impact in several different ways. So it's kind of hard to put our finger on exactly what the impact's going to be until we see it play out. But the general impact, the broadest impact, is the fact that it does open up keep that weakness along the east coast for Maria to move into and not move to the west. And yes, Raymond, some of the models did go left and bring it up toward Chesapeake Bay. Cullen Huxco, northwest New Jersey on the edge of Jose's clouds. Yeah, you must have had great sunsets. You probably have another great one today. Lidl Griffin, do I think Maria could accelerate northward after the Bahamas? I don't think it's going to accelerate northward because there's no trough. We have a ridge position here in the east coast of the United States. So like Jose, it kind of crawled up the east coast. So this is going to crawl up also. Otherwise, Maria would be here by the weekend if it was going to accelerate, if you had a deep trough, but that's not the case. You've got an upper high and a very, very weak steering pattern up and down the eastern seaboard. Yeah, Cynthia, I want it over too, but I got a feeling that we might have to get a pause and then maybe get one or two to look at during the month of October. Let's see. Okie AG, I know you need some rain and cooler. I know I haven't been paying much attention to the weather elsewhere, but the weather, the hurricanes just take up so much time with regards to all this. But as soon as it settles down, I will, of course, go back to what I usually do. Let's see. Water rising from Magamargi. Yeah, the tidal flood, and there's been a moderate coastal flooding out of Jose. The water's pretty high. I was actually quite surprised at how high the tides were yesterday, the first tides during the morning. So would not, there is going to be continued moderate coastal flooding over the next couple of days for sure. And let's see, just make sure. It's great morning unless you're in the Caribbean. That's true. Meta Vinci, if models show Jose drifting west, why wouldn't Maria be drawn west with it once it passed the Outer Banks? Well, that's something that the European did a couple of days ago when it took the remnant low into West Virginia, and the trough that it created basically did lift Maria up along, very close to the East Coast. Yeah, there are possibilities here. I think the range of possibilities is very large. I think one of the things we can hopefully safely say is that given how the models are all pretty tight, they don't really show any of these westward tracks. So, we're pretty certain that it's going to take the track just to the east of the Bahamas and then ride its way up off the southeast coast, southeast of North Carolina, maybe around the same spot that Jose was in. We know that's going to happen. We're also going to have to look at what kind of upwelling issues we have as well because of Jose taking such a long time to move over those waters. I'm sure the water temperatures are cooler, and that could have an impact on Maria's strength. So I think all possibilities north of the North Carolina latitude are on the table, and we are of course not going to know any of this and how as far as how it's going to play out for many days yet. I think this is going to take a while. This is going to be a puzzle that's going to take a while to solve. And one of the things I think you should watch out for is watch Jose. Let's see if it decays the way forecasters have been saying, because so far it hasn't. And the GFS, for at least a little while longer, holds on to a fairly vibrant system in terms of its structure, and so does the European. So let's see how long that happens and how long it holds together and what that does to the impact going forward. Any chance that Maria develops into an Agnes situation with major flooding? Yeah, David, I would kind of think it's highly unlikely, but, I'm always with a question like that. It's like I don't want to say unequivocally no. I don't see any. Let me answer it this way. Right now, I don't see anything that would create that particular condition of something coming up and then coming back westward into Pennsylvania from across New Jersey into Pennsylvania and stalling out. Right now, the favored track would be, the favored idea would be a turn up off the East Coast, and then once it gets to after it gets to 33 or 34 north, we start to see a lot of variations in terms of where it might go. So why don't we just let's see how all this evolves. I hate to fall back on that, but really there's nothing else I can say other than let's just see how it evolves going forward. First things first, Maria will emerge off of Puerto Rico. Let's see what it strengthens back into. Let's watch the upper flow and the weather models over the next couple of days and what they evolve into in terms of the longer range pattern going into next week. And we're going to be watching to see how Jose impacts all of this, as that will still be around. All right, folks, I need to get awake, okay? So I'm going to end it at this point. Thanks for everybody jumping on. Thank you for hitting Super Chat today. I really appreciate it very much. And we will live stream. I'm going to live stream tonight as long as there's no problems with, if as far as timing is concerned. I should be able to live stream tomorrow night. I'm sorry, tonight. Probably around 8 o'clock, much like I did last night. So everybody have a great rest of your day, and keep it tuned. You go to the website, meteorologistjoecioffi.com. You get the latest weather information on what's going on with the hurricanes and other things. And my buddy Angry Ben on nycweathernow.com. All right, folks, we'll see you sometime this evening.